For example, the one in Newfoundland started in 1832. Canada became a country in 1867. So we're standing on the shoulders of a lot of other people, even before Confederation, who were fighting for their own parliaments in their own jurisdictions, in their own colonies, as they were called at the time. And then, of course, we got Canada in 1867. But we must acknowledge all of these people who were fighting at that time in even more difficult odds than we're fighting in. And fought, and very often won very wonderful causes. Now, we can, and I have for a long time, talked about all the things that have happened and all of the leaders who have let us down. And I want to not only criticize today, I want to offer solutions. Okay? I just don't want to hear, I want to offer solutions. And I want you to listen to me, I know you're going to listen to me closely anyway, I want you to listen to me even more closely. This is a proposal to reclaim Canada. This is a proposal that I call, as Dr. before me just said, the Magna Carta of today. And here's what we, the Canadians, citizens of Canada, gathered here today. I hope you will vote by your applause later to support the following. Okay. Number one, an independent public national inquiry to examine whether government, federal, provincial, and territorial mandates and lockdowns were necessary and constitutional. People in government and their agencies who are found guilty of breaking the law after due process must be brought to justice.
Yeah! Justice for the people.
Such an inquiry cannot be led by the governments of Canada, who are the major subjects of the inquiry. Instead, a citizens group must be formed for that purpose. And these governments and their agencies must open their books and release to the inquiry and to all the public all the necessary relevant information concerning their actions during the pandemic.
Yeah!
We talk accountability, this is accountability.
Almost there, brother.
Number two.
I'm almost ready to jump the stage.
This is a tough one to swallow, as a lot of the other ones I
I'm
mentioned
looking
are going to
for
be tough
Pat.
to
You need
swallow.
to, Pat, that's right.
All registered political parties in Canada, federal, provincial, territorial,
I need the one.
must be obligated by law to publish audited financial statements annually.
Yeah!
Do you know, some of you who follow me real closely know, do you know that right now none of the federal political parties who are in the House of Commons publish any audited financial statements?
Of course.
Why should we entrust them with our money and billions each year in government taxation if they won't show us their books for their own parties? That's puzzling, isn't it? When I published my leadership campaign expenses, audited financial statements, when I ran for the leadership of the Progressive Conservative Party of Newfoundland, there was silence. No other leadership candidate at the time did it, and I don't know how many leadership candidates across the country has ever did it since, provincially or federally. Audited financial statements when I took over the leadership of the province. And that's sure that the first part is covered too. That's pretty basic, isn't it?
You rock, Peckford!
Isn't that basic? Shouldn't all the political parties that you're going to be examining for the next federal election, shouldn't you know how they spend their money?
Show us the money!
Okay. Stay with me. Stay with me. No member of Parliament, number 3, no member of Parliament or members of provincial legislatures or territorial assemblies can sit in these chambers if they have broken a Canadian law as determined by a court or an ethics or conflict of interest commissioner.
Yeah! I support that!
Why should we have lawbreakers be lawmakers? The Prime Minister of Canada today sits in the Parliament and he's broken the law 5 times. Doesn't that sound reasonable? No. That anybody who breaks the law can't sit in our parliaments to make laws? Number 4, every private member's bill or resolution presented before a parliament in Canada must be debated and voted upon within 6 months of the parliamentary sitting. You go and ask an MP after this thing is over, your MP, ask him if he put a private member's resolution on the table tomorrow in the federal parliament, when would it be heard? 3 years, 4 years, depending on how long before the next election, and then the election gets away, a new parliament is formed, he's got to reintroduce it again. Every MP who's elected by you in your constituency, you should have the assurance to know that your MP that just was elected to go to your federal parliament, if he wants to enter a resolution on your behalf or on behalf of the citizens of that constituency, should be debated in that parliament in a reasonable period of time. Otherwise, what's the point of having an MP?
Hey, Karen!
I'm going to get in a lot of trouble on this one. All judges of the Supreme Court, the provinces, and of the courts of appeal, the federal courts, and the Supreme Court of Canada must, by law, have criteria established as to their qualifications to serve. Not something that was passed by one department, but a special law of the Parliament of what qualifications you must have to even apply to be a judge. And all government-nominated candidates for those positions must be subject to a hearing by a parliamentary committee who will present to full Parliament their recommendations to approve or reject any nominated judge. Parliament's decision is final. One time, 10 years ago, I would never say this, I would respect our traditions, that we could really trust our traditions, that things could be done properly. But we know now, we have it proven to us in spades that we cannot trust that system which does not come through Parliament, but which is done by the Prime Minister and the Minister of Justice, and with the Judicial Council and other people who are going to recommend, and then they get nominated, not be nominated, they get approved to be the judges of this country. We now know that the people must be more involved for who controls the law of this country. Who interprets the law of this country. If in fact, as all the political philosophers say, the final thing rests with the people, then it should happen to this too.
Absolutely, 100%.
Thank you. How about this one? And you'll remember this one from a few years ago. All parliamentary committees of all Canadian parliaments must have safeguards whereby the majority of the committee cannot close down those committees when the business of the committee has not been completed. Just across the street here, we have Jody Wilson-Raybould, who was the Minister of Justice, and who was summarily, right, attacked by her own government to change her department's mind on the regular course of business dealing with a very large corporation in this country. And after all that was over, and she didn't buckle, right? Then she went to a parliamentary committee to tell her story. And what happened when she went to a parliamentary committee to tell her story? The committee suddenly closed down, even though she had more to say. How could that happen in a democracy? How could that happen? Tyranny of the majority. This is what Thomas Jefferson and James Madison talked about when they were putting together the American Constitution. They were talking about ways to ensure that the majority didn't step on the minority, that rights and freedoms were not part of being a majority. You had to defend those rights and freedoms. So we must ensure in the future, this is part of the Magna Carta, this is part of our new Magna Carta, we must ensure in the future that parliamentary committees in the territories, in the provinces, and in the federal parliament are not closed down when there's legitimate witnesses available to tell more testimony about the subject of that parliamentary committee. And this was a former Minister of Justice. This was an MP of the Parliament being shut down from telling her story by whom? By Parliament. You know that is wrong. And this cannot be allowed. And if these things are not changed, these are the fundamentals of our system. If these things are not changed, if we don't have honest political parties to start with, how can we have honest governments later? Yes. One follows the other. How about this one? How about this one? Here's another of our new Magna Carta for Canada. All governments of Canada must have balanced budgets legislation enacted, with no exceptions except in time of war or insurrection or the country's existence is at stake. And the government would have to prove that in order not to have a balanced budget. They have to prove that. So balanced budgets, we're not going to allow our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren to pay off our silly, foolish, undisciplined ways. And fathers and mothers and uncles and aunts and grandfathers and grandmothers, all authorities responsible for primary, elementary, and high school education must enact curriculum measures to ensure civics is a mandatory subject in each grade after grade 8.
Okay, I gotta roll on. That's a good little chunk of Brian Peckford.